Dean Obadallah. He wants to be your Muslim friend.
Most Muslims, I know many, are great people.
Watch this.
People.
You're listening to the Dean Obadallah Show, where comedy meets politics and all things in between.
And welcome back, Dean Obadallah Show. We're live right here Friday, February 1st. And we're going to take some more calls this hour. I promise you. In studio now, right now, is my good friend Raul Reyes, an attorney, NBC.com contributor, CNN contributor, and really an expert on immigration issues. He's sort of the go-to guy, I'd say, over there at MS. I'm the guy. There's Marisa Teresa Kumar and other women, but of the men, I think you're the lead guy that they go. So get closer to the microphone.
Okay.
So look, there's breaking news abounding around us, and I want to talk about ICE force-feeding detained immigrants. I think it's an important issue that needs to be covered. You know, the story breaking all around the screen sitting here when we're sitting here in the commercials, I always mention there's MSCNN and Fox News, is the Ralph Northam story. And that in the yearbook, if you haven't seen it because you work and you have a real life or you're not obsessed with every breaking news in the media, the yearbook of Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, that it's for his college, 1984, Eastern Medical School. And on it, just normal pictures
it's his
of
medical school.
It is.
Right? Medical school.
Because he went to, his alma mater was VMI, the Virginia Military Institute. Then he went to, and then he served in the military. And on his yearbook page, there's certain pictures of him, and then there's a picture, oddly, of someone in blackface, another person in a Klan outfit. It looks like holding a beer. And it broke a few hours ago. It was confirmed it was from his school, and it was authentic. And everyone was waiting for a statement. And the statement came out a short time ago saying, I'm deeply sorry for the decision I made to appear as I did in this photo and for the hurt that decision caused then and now. This behavior is not in keeping with who I am today, the values I fought for throughout my career in the military, in medicine, and public service. And can go on from there, but you get the idea. He's not saying which of the two people he is, but by that statement, we're both lawyers. When you're lawyering this statement here, he's admitting he's one of the two men in the photo.
Right. And in my view, it doesn't matter which one he is because blackface is offensive.
Right.
And so is obviously a KKK outfit.
In 1984.
I mean, even if it were 74, even if it were, 64, those types of things when they come out now, those are they are offensive. You know, there's no way to spin something like that.
Right.
Probably it's good that he's owning it, but what are the voters in Virginia how are they going to feel about that?
Well, he doesn't run for re-election. You only get one term in Virginia. So it's a question is he staying there or not? He's going to get pressure, I think, from national Democrats, I would imagine, to resign. The only way not is if, I would think, African-American leaders in the state said, we know this guy. Whatever he was in 1984, he's been far different as lieutenant governor before this, as state senator. He's been a great ally of our community. It's actually made our lives better. If that were to happen, perhaps he could stay. If not, he might get pushed out. The lieutenant governor is Justin Fairfax, who's a young African-American guy who would then become the governor of Virginia. But let's flip it around here. And this is what I try to do, because as progressives, I always say, like, as progressives, empathy is simple. You kind of say, what if the shoe was on the other foot? What if a Republican governor right now came out in the South and we saw this, like Matt Bevins, who's much younger than him, but anyway, say Matt Bevins in Kentucky, or any conservative governor, the governor in Texas. If you saw this now and it's from 1984, what would be your reaction?
Well, see, Dean, I think when we look at our, obviously highly partisan political scene today, they're two different worlds, because were this to happen, in my view, in Republican circles with a very prominent Republican, I really doubt that there would be any consequences. I mean, you have to go to the extreme lengths of someone like, say, Steve King, and who is still in office, and all he gets is a censure from the party, whereas Democrats, progressives, for better or worse, are very good at policing themselves. For example, Al Franken, who there's documented evidence, obviously, of his misconduct. He was immediately pushed out. That's
right.
done. That doesn't happen with Republicans. They will keep their own people in there no matter what. I mean,
it's a great point. Steve King has not been expelled from Congress, even though the Democrats control Congress now. He was elected, but open white supremacy. But at the same time, I know you're giving us context, and I appreciate that, and you should. But I don't want it to sound like we're doing the Trumpian side defense, which is, well, what about Hillary? What about that kind of stuff?
Oh, no, I'm just speaking politically, because either way, no matter whether he was Democrat, Republican, whatever, it's highly offensive. And his statement, I mean, to me, I read it, it wasn't so much as a lawyerly statement. It was just, I mean, once it is you, and even if had he not admitted it, it would come out that it were him. That's the world we live in. That you have to own it. What else can he say? other than saying I resign effective immediately, there's nothing to say other than basically, I'm sorry and I've evolved, and hope that people, accept that, and that it's very different. That's a very personal thing to people.
I look at the picture. As I stare at the picture, it's increasingly I'm like, I think you should go. But I mean, that's going to be up to the people I think up to the local community in Virginia. And I imagine they said the DNC weighed in, and I didn't see the actual statement. I imagine Tom Perez is going to take a pretty zero tolerance view here, because we have to be different than the other side. Because
Right.
Donald Trump is a man who, some conservative called in, I didn't take his call. He was all angry at me because I went through Trump's real comments about race, about saying white supremacists were very fine people, at least equating them with those fighting white supremacy with those advocating white supremacy, very fine people on both sides, saying African-American leading ones like Maxine Waters are low IQ or dumb and unintelligent, calling Africa an asshole country, refusing to denounce David Duke until ashamed to do that. And the list goes on of Trump's bigotry and racism is clear. And in retrospect, you mentioned Al Franken. There are some Democrats who now are still upset with Senator Gillibrand for forcing Franken out so quickly.
Right. But at the same time, this photo controversy, it is different because what Al Franken did was wrong. It was a different issue. But remember, the Klan is a symbol, not just a symbol.
It's a terrorist group.
It was actual violence against African Americans, and that's something that there's a generation alive today who lived through that history. So how can you just even at your best say oh, I was young and stupid, or it was a joke, when people have lived history knowing what the Klan means and how it impacted them or their families or the terror that they sowed in their heyday in the South.
And I'm not making light of this, but I mean, what the hell was going on in Eastern Virginia medical school that they would put this in their yearbook? Because someone could say, hey, this is the picture I want. And you would hope someone else goes, what, are you kidding me?
I know.
You had a Klan
Right,
outfit and blackface? But they go, hey, no, sounds great. Seems funny to me. Because here at Eastern Virginia Medical School, this is what we do. I mean,
Right.
And I have not looked back at the school. Did they segregate? Did the school have not by law, because it would have been unconstitutional at that point or illegal at that point, but as a matter of fact, was it just all white students? I have no idea what's going on there.
Even if it were, though, come on.
No.
The Klan is the
I'm
Klan.
wondering what is I wonder at
It
this
was
school,
1984. I mean,
I know it's not 19. Even if it was 1954,
it would
might
always
even
be offensive,
worse.
but still, 1984. Come on. So I don't know. It's a terrible situation. It's hard to see. I don't know.
Well,
it's
I
hard
want to
see
be. I want to be
anything-
as clear. I always want us to be better than them. I don't want us to
Agreed.
be equal. I want to go, but what about Steve King? And that's a good argument. Steve King is a white supremacist piece of garbage, and he's still in the GOP. And Donald Trump is a racist who is the president, the leader of the GOP. But we have to be a stark contrast, and not just policy, but in who we embrace and tolerate, and how we celebrate diversity, and how they demonize diversity. And we have to celebrate what America is today while they want to take us back. And so, I mean, look, and I interviewed Ralph Northam numerous times as a candidate, soft-spoken, nice guy, really. And it's interesting, the one thing he talked about evolving on in our conversations, I was just thinking back, and I should go listen to some of the interviews, because we did a whole 1-hour town hall with a live audience during the campaign down in Washington, D.C. at our studio. He admitted during the campaign, the Democratic primary, of voting for George Bush. It may have been 2000 or 2004. I can't remember which one. And he had openly admitted to that in the primary against a Democrat who was more liberal than him. So I interviewed him during the primary, and I go, he was running against Tom Perriello, who was more progressive. And all the Bernie people liked Tom more. And I said to Ralph, why did you admit that? No one's going to know who you voted for. It's secret. And he said, I'm transparent, and I've evolved. I've sort of changed. He goes, well, I was a conservative Democrat. I think it was John Kerry. If it was 2004, I'm not sure it was 2000.
Right.
I can't remember which one. He goes, but I made a mistake then, and I'm a different person now. People can evolve, and that's the truth. And the question is, and we've had these conversations, maybe me and you, but many times with people of color. As a Muslim, those anti-Muslim bigots, I want them to evolve for the better. But you just can't say I'm fine now. You've got to show it. You've got to prove it to us. And if someone proves it over years and decades, should you not say, and I'm not defending Ralph Northam at all, I'm saying in the big picture, should we not say if someone truly shows they've changed, that we should reward that by going, good, we want more people
that's
like
where
that.
the context is important, because remember, for example, President Obama evolved on same-sex marriage.
Right,
and
exactly.
people accept that because, they look at him and say, that's a reasonable guy, and he has, they look at his say, body of political activism and work, and they're cool with that. This situation is just so different because it's the KKK, and I don't disagree with you, but
I'm not trying to defend Ralph. I'm talking the big picture.
No, I'm talking when you say the Democrats, it's important for them to be better than the other party, to set an example.
Much better.
To me, it's not even that, because to be honest, the Republicans have set such a low bar. Democrats could be better than Republicans and still be horrendous. So I think Democrats just have to. The goal is just to set an example for all Americans, the best example that the party is capable of setting, not just to be better than the Republicans, because that doesn't take a lot.
That's a good point.
These days in the age of
You're
Trump.
right. We should
just to be the best that we can be, that Democrats can be for others, for all citizens.
As President Obama said, you shouldn't grade on a curve, and he was talking about Donald Trump at the time, that it's not that horrible, like it's still horrible. And you're right. We should have our own standards we stick to, and if it's
no matter
20
what,
times
no matter
better than
who is
Republicans,
president.
who cares? We've got to do that. So it's interesting, though, what's going on here. I mean, it's a national story now. It's exploding on cable, and I completely get it. If it was a Republican governor, it would the same. Don't forget, there was a Republican Secretary of State in Florida. His last name, it sounds like Turtle, but it's not. He just resigned a week ago. They found a picture of him 15 years ago, during Hurricane Katrina, dressed as a black woman and at a Halloween party.
And that was making life a disaster.
And he resigned within hours. And he was Secretary of State. He had just been appointed by Ron DeSantis, the monkey around guy. So even for the monkey around guy, he's like, that's a bit much. I mean, he goes, I use like racist dog whistle, but that's outfit's a bit much for us here. So it's going to be, I wonder if he'll survive this.
And you know who he'll be up to, in my view, in an ideal world? This is something that...
There's no vote. There's no re-election.
Right, but the consensus. This is something right now, who is one of the most valuable constituencies of the Democratic Party in terms of voters, and that's African-American women.
The number one.
When they turn out, they can move mountains.
Sure.
They're a force to be reckoned with. And I think, and obviously in the coming days, we're going to see all sorts of commentary and discussion about this. This is an opportunity, really, where I think the African-American community really deserves to be center stage, and many of the rest of us just listen. Because, for example, I'm a person of color. I'm Mexican. My family, just being Latino, going back in the day in Texas, never dealt with the Klan. That's not in our lived experience. So I think sometimes this is an opportunity to listen to people who have the connection. They have the history. They deserve. This is an opportunity for them to be heard.
And that's a great way of putting it. And the African-American community, the leaders would have stand up in Virginia and said, he's been great for us for decades, and this was horrible. But at the same time, they come forward and go, this is terrible. Come on, you got to go. I mean, what kind of message you're sending in our state? Virginia's moving forward. So we'll play it out that way. It's going to be a week. It's one of these stories that they're going to talk about all weekend because it's easy to talk about. And everyone's going to have these strong opinions, one side or the other.
But just to me, this is like the type of thing, I mean, no offense, I don't want to hear from Meghan McCain about this. I want to, you know what I mean? I want to hear from African Americans, especially in the South, especially in Virginia, especially the older
Fox
generation.
News is going to panel white people to talk about
exactly
this.
Like that
while.
to me is
That's
nonsense. You have to hear the like what to me are authentic voices. So,
and here's my selfish point of view on selfish might not be the right word. Maybe it is. You tell me, Raul. The outrage over this, and look, they just went to the Secretary of State candidate, the guy who was Secretary of State in Florida on MSNBC. I think there should be the outrage to this, and there should be a big discussion about this. Last week I wrote about 4 young white guys. One was a teenager, 2 were like 19 and 20. One was a self-professed MAGA supporter who plotted a terrorist attack to kill African-American Muslims in Islamabad, New York State. A place that's been subject to other threats. The police chief said at the press conference, because I watched the entire press conference, that someone would die if they had mason jars that they turned into bombs. If it would have worked, and he goes, with every indication they were going to succeed and people would have died. I wrote about it for the Daily Beast, some other people. No one on cable news would cover it. I couldn't get MS or CNN to cover it at all. And I'm like, this was life and death for my community. I mean, literally life and death.
Right.
And I couldn't interviewed them so many times because they're targets of hate, sadly enough. And they're really nice. I've met many of them in person. They've been on the show in the past. That Muslim lives don't matter to the mainstream media because we don't get the ratings they want unless we are the terrorists. But when we're the target, they don't care.
No, sad but true.
And it's heartbreaking
I don't
to see that.
disagree with you on that.
It's really...
I don't disagree with you on that. And I mean, listen. I'm associated with with NBC Universal, so I'm not like criticizing. And we are the. No, I'm just saying that people would say I am part of the mainstream media, but you can say that about so many communities. For example, when you see Latinos prominent in the news cycle, it's usually around quote unquote illegals. When you see Muslims in the news, it's almost always in the context of terrorism, where they are the alleged terrorists. So often we see, not just in the news but in entertainment, the trope of angry black women or all the stereotypes. And I'm not just saying it as a criticism. I'm saying that, to me, I'm the optimist type. The first step in solving that problem is just to call it out. And this is something, we're part of the media. And
maybe to try to have meetings behind the scenes. Because I call it on Twitter, and I get producers who I know going, well, you're really hard on the media. I go, I didn't name your network. You happen to read my Twitter feed, but I try to call it out. But maybe it'd be more effective at this point if I try to get meetings to talk behind the scenes to say, you guys, you've got to cover this stuff.
But I think also, to me, the way I see it is, look, like you or me saying, I am the media. Which
well, no, I covered it here on my show. I wrote about it for the Daily Beast, so I get it out there a little bit, and others did too. And I think part of the problem is I view cable news as the universe too much, and I shouldn't. That's the only way to get your story out there, and it's not anymore.
No.
It's not, right? Because all right, let's take a break. We're gonna come back. Todd, I'm not taking your call. Todd is my friend, but he's like, I think the governor. Because I think the standard you've set is true. If you're African American and you want to comment on this, is fine. If you're a white liberal and you want to defend, if you think Ralph Northam should stay, I don't want to entertain that conversation here. That's not the conversation I want to have. So let's take a break, come back with our friend Raul Reyes. We might take a call on this, but I want to talk about ICE force feeding immigrants who are seeking asylum down in
El Paso.
Texas, in El Paso. It's unbelievable what's going on. I mean, they're treating them like they're Guantanamo Bay terrorists. So let's take a break, come right back.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
My slogan for Trump in 2020, Trump for prison 2020.
SiriusXM Progress. And now, more of the Dean Obeidallah Show on Sirius XM's Progress.
And welcome back, Dean Obeidallah Show. We're live right here Friday, February 1st. In studio is our friend Raul Reyes, attorney, NBC.com contributor. And by the way, just remember that Ralph Northam, his Republican opponent, was a guy, Corey Stewart, who was known as a neo-Confederate, who made his primary campaign about defending Confederate statues and the Confederate flag, and had palled around with real white supremacists.
Oh, wow.
So
the irony
it's kind of
is
interesting,
neck deep.
right, going on there. Look, I want to talk about with you here with ICE force-feeding detained immigrants. Tell us a little bit about what's going on at the border. It got a little print coverage, maybe a little on air, but I think it's an important story.
Right now. Well, first of all, you've heard this before, but I always start off just by reminding people that when we talk about immigration detention is prison. It's actually worse than prison in many ways because the people in these facilities do not have all the rights that American citizens do. So we're talking about prison-like conditions. What's happening is people are on hunger strikes across the country, although most of them, the majority of them right now, are in the El Paso facility for ICE. And after you go, I think it's 3-4 days refusing meals, that's officially a hunger strike. And now ICE is force-feeding these people. And for anyone...
It's about 30 people, the estimate is, from what I read.
And to me, one of the angles of this case that's quite interesting, that really jumps out at me, these are not people who are protesting that I'm going to be deported or I'm being held by the government. That's not what they're protesting. They're not protesting their immigration claims per se. What they are protesting is that their conditions are filthy and disgusting, that they do not have language translators available, that basically the environment is inhumane. And that's supported by a huge body of evidence, not only from journalists, but even from the Inspector General of Department of Homeland Security. And when I talk about the language barrier, it's because many of these hunger strikers, the majority, I believe, are from India. Many are Sikhs. Right. So they speak languages like Punjabi. And along the border, ICE doesn't have people who speak their language. So they're not giving them any information about their case. So just to be clear, they're not saying, I want to stay in the U.S., I have a right to be here. They're just saying, this is not right. This is a human rights case. Now you can see I'm getting all worked up here.
That's
but
fine.
Anyway, when you were talking about force feeding, this, even if you are at Mount Sinai in New York City, which is a beautiful hospital, this is a very painful procedure. They take a hard plastic tube, try and put a little Vaseline on it to kind of bend it. They usually wrap it around your fingers to bend it, and then very gently insert it in your nose all the way down your nasal cavity to feed you. Now, imagine this being done in prison-like conditions with no supervision or accountability from outside groups by guards who are probably already angry at you that you have refused food and started these legal complaints going. This is just absolute brutality. And again, it's not because they're complaining about being deported. They're just complaining about they're not being informed about their case. They don't know how long they have to wait. They're
saying rampant verbal abuse is the way AP broke
a lot of like racialized abuse.
Sure.
I mean, across all the facilities that ICE has, you have all sorts of abuse in virtually every category, from racial abuse to sexual violence. And remember, these facilities, 71% are private companies, are run by private companies. So there's even less accountability because it's not the U.S. government supervising them. It's just these private companies wanting to make money. So they're doing this to these hunger strikers. And ICE says, now, many immigrant rights lawyers, immigrant right groups, and immigration lawyers dispute this, but ICE says the average length of time in detention is 44 days. In my experience, many people I know say that it's really longer. These are the government statistics that we have to go with. So,
44 days to see a judge, essentially?
44 days waiting there in detention. And to put this in context, and this is not even the best example, but it's the only one I can give people an idea if you've never, obviously most people haven't been in prison. If you've ever been in a hospital, you know that one day lying in a hospital bed, that's a comfortable situation. One day in a hospital feels like a week. A week in a hospital feels like a month. I mean, you're just there confined to a room doing nothing. Now imagine these great lengths of time in very uncomfortable temperatures, cut off from all access from your family, usually from legal representation as well, and you're not even being given information in your own language, which the U.S. government is obligated to do. That is the law. I mean, if there's one person who speaks Punjabi, they still have the right to receive notices from the U.S. government about their case and what's going to happen to them in Punjabi. It's incumbent upon the government to find them a translator, no matter where they are. So these are horrific things going on. And the saddest thing to me is that it will take a long time before we know the full extent of the type of brutality and inhumanity that is occurring in these detention facilities. And these are problems that started, well before Trump. But everyone knows that they are much worse under the Trump administration because there is so little oversight, there is so little accountability, and this is just a group of people who they have come to public attention. We don't.
Right. And they did the hunger strike. From what I read, their lawyers said to bring attention to the situation they're going through, so hopefully some of the media would write about it.
Right. And what's shocking to me also about the case is that the judge allowed the forced feedings, but the judge did not order investigation into their claims.
Yeah, that's
because
what I read.
again, they're just complaining that they're being treated like animals, that they are being held in disgusting, filthy conditions. And if you've been to those places, everyone knows that that's how they are, even under the best circumstances. So this case makes me very angry. It makes me very ashamed as an American.
And these are not criminals. I mean, some are applying for asylum, some are just waiting for hearings.
Right.
And they're not in a criminal justice system. They're in the Donald Trump ICE system. And when you have someone like Trump who demonizes and dehumanizes immigrants coming in, that has to affect the people who are working in ICE and Border Patrol to view these people as less than human.
Oh, absolutely. That's a very long-standing problem. And I'm not, and listen, I'm not dogging people who do work for Border Patrol or ICE. Many of whom are Latino, because in the Southwest, that's actually a very good job.
Okay.
Where there are not a lot of jobs, in some places, that's a good job if you work for Border Patrol. However, the problem is not these individuals, but it's the whole structure and who heads up our immigration, the immigration system. It comes back to the Attorney General, who until recently was Jeff Sessions, because they have the purview over immigration courts. We have Trump as president setting these outrageous policies that have produced tremendous public backlash. But what basically is invisible, that there will be untold stories until years to come, is what people who are in the system right now are experiencing, the type of trauma, the depravity. I mean, it's rough. It is really rough, and I have been to some of those facilities.
Oh, you have gone?
It's rough. And
Congresswoman Veronica Escobar, who is now there, I think she took Beto O'Rourke's
right.
seat.
I believe she's in El Paso.
She went and said this is deeply alarming and wants to see changes. I mean, it's like they're treating them like they're Guantanamo Bay, Gitmo terrorists who they force feed to keep alive for whatever reasons they had to keep them alive years later. And it's being done in our name, folks. I mean, it's being done in the name of the U.S. government, our government, and our tax dollars.
And the great majority of immigration violations, they're not criminal. I mean, the Trump administration may charge people with crimes as a result of their lack of status, but most immigration offenses are civil offenses. And by ICE's own definition, most of the people in immigration detention, this is ICE, what ICE says, they are not a threat to public safety or their communities. But we have a president and then until recently, Attorney General, who's basically their mantra was lock up as many people as possible. So we have produced a separate system of mass incarceration, side by side with our criminal justice system.
And now we have the sweating Attorney General. You see Matthew Whitaker, I think he jogs and then does Here, let me ask you about this. Let's play a clip, Lauren. This is Trump today saying that we've already built the wall. It's like it's being built and it's almost done. And this is today, folks. So I've got to get your reaction. Here's clip number 5, please.
President, why not just go ahead and do the national emergency now if the
Well, we're building the wall now. Yeah, we're building the wall. People don't understand that. They're starting to learn. We're spending a lot of money that we have on hand. It's like in a business, but we have money on hand, and we're building, I would say we will have 115 miles of wall, maybe a little bit more than that very shortly. It's being built. Some of it's already been completed, and in San Diego, if you look, it's been completed. It's really beautiful, brand new. We have on the wall that's under construction, and we're giving out a lot of contracts. So we're building the wall. It's getting built one way or the other. We're building the wall. A lot of it is, the chant now should be finish the wall as opposed to build the wall, because we're building a lot of wall.
We're going to finish the wall. Who's going to pay for it? You are. Oh, sorry, I forgot to add that. So, by the way, did we build a wall overnight? Did I miss something? I thought we had a whole shutdown because he couldn't get money for his wall.
I think the only kernel of truth in that maybe is that when he mentioned San Diego, they have made some erected some prototypes of a wall, which are basically sort of like, examples of what a wall could be, several of which have already been shown to be ineffective, that people could dig tunnels under, that the materials they used were not, really ideal for the climate in the desert region. So that's the only thing I could think of. To me, that this is basically sort of a message from Trump to his base, I guess, some type of messaging
We built the wall.
that
done.
if he keeps saying that enough, that they will give him a pass
Greatest
on
wall
this
ever.
issue, maybe. But it's not in any sense rooted in reality. Otherwise, we wouldn't be going through this national
know. Are we
drama
done?
of whether or not the government's going to be shut down again, or we're going to have a national emergency, and that makes no sense.
And he said that 117 miles are being built, have been built. The
That
border
doesn't
is
make
about
sense.
2,000 miles, folks, 1,900 something miles. Roughly 1/3 of the U.S.-Mexico line, they say 654 miles have security fencing, but really, they said it's really only about 350 miles of real sort of wall that pedestrians couldn't go through. The others are for cars. So
Right.
there's not much wall there. Is San Diego, I guess Tijuana area has a wall? That's my
Right.
understanding.
Oh, right. Especially, right, going down to the ocean and stuff. I mean, part of the reason why we don't have an actual barrier up to this point is because there are several places where the U.S. government hasn't come up with materials that can withstand long-term extreme heat and extreme cold. So, I mean, because, it's terrain, and parts of it also have to do with privately held land, especially in Texas, environmental concerns. So there are many reasons. But for him to just now throw out this idea that the wall is half built and we need it is ridiculous. And one thing that this, to me, gets lost a lot in his demand, in the president's demand for the wall. He keeps saying he wants $5 million for the wall.
$5 billion.
$5 billion for the wall. That's, even if he were given this wall, that's not what it would cost. That at the most, it's sort of a down payment, because every estimate I've seen that's reliable or credible, the type of wall that he wants along the whole border would cost between 20 and 25 billion, not 5.
You don't understand, Raul. He's
So
gonna
that
do
makes no sense.
His old practice of just stiffing contractors. So he's only
Well,
going to
there's
pay them $5 billion, and they're like, sue me. What are you going to do? I'm the president. For the last month and a half, all Trump administration has really been talking about in terms of policy is this wall and border security. That's it. Is it because there's no other ideas that they're done? I mean, because they can't get any legislation passed in the House, we know that. So legislatively, it's done. Are we just going to hear him talk the wall for the next 2 years?
My view, I think to a large extent, yes, because that's something his base understands, and that is also something that's very much on the minds of his true cabinet, which is people like Ann Coulter and that gentleman whose name I can't remember, but he's
Rush?
very obese. Yes, Rush
Very
Limbaugh.
obese, you were gonna say.
Rush Limbaugh. That is Trump's true cabinet. That's what they want. So I think he will, especially as we get closer to the next election, that's what they want. We will hear it again and again. And aside from the fact that this president has not shown to be able to discuss in any type of detail economic policy or international agreements, trade
Nothing.
policy, he sticks to the immigration issue because in his mind it's very much a black-white simplistic
And
issue.
wall is simple. It's medieval. The wall is
Right.
like the wheel.
That's something
and
he
by the
is
way,
comfortable with.
I could care less what Ann Coulter says. I'm not even sure how much weight she has in her own right-wing crazy world, but she did say
She does
today.
with the president, though.
She does. She said today that we only elected this lunatic, talking about Trump, for one reason, and if he doesn't build a wall, he should be primaried. And it's so interesting that Trump, on some level, views himself as the king of his base, but he's a king who's afraid of his base.
Right.
Because a real king would be like, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to build a wall. I'm doing whatever I want, and you're still going to love me because I'm your monarch. A divine right. This is why I'm here. In reality, Donald Trump is afraid of his base so much because it's the only thing standing between him and potentially, if he had impeachment and a trial in the Senate, him staying in office. That's
Right.
really it, because he can't get the legislation passed.
And not even just afraid of his base. My take is that he's afraid of many things. Nancy Pelosi, the Democrats, potential voters, because at heart he is a bully, and all bullies are driven by fear and insecurity. They are not driven by a sense of power.
No, I agree.
And security. He is a bully, and there's that inherent fear that comes with it.
I interviewed Lawrence Leamer today. It's a pre-tape. It'll play next week. Who just wrote the new book on Trump and Mar-a-Lago. And the whole reason he bought Mar-a-Lago was out of insecurity because the real wealthy old elite in Palm Beach would never accept him.
Exactly.
And this has been his whole life story, from Queens not being accepted in the Manhattan elite, even though he had money looked down on. The same thing over in Palm Beach. And on some level, I think I don't really care why he does things, but I think this is why when he slams his own generals and say, I know more, because he's never been accepted by those who actually understand things, or he has this chip on his shoulders, insecurity, so he lashes out and goes, you should go back to school, literally saying 2 days ago, you should go back to school. These are generals. You appointed a lot of these people as intelligence heads, and you're going to fight with them publicly and say they don't know what they're talking about. Then either you shouldn't have picked them, but we know they know what they're talking about, or you should listen, but he can't, because insecurity is so deep. It's bad for our nation. I don't care if he had insecurity if he wasn't president. It's not safe for our nation.
No, it's not safe for our nation. And I recall many people say that this whole the whole presidential campaign was rooted in his insecurity and anger because of that one time at a White House, I believe it was a correspondence dinner,
Seth Meyers and Barack Obama,
when Obama and some comedians mocked him, and he was in a room with the powerful and well-connected, and that enraged him and sort of drove him to act out in that way. And yet, I cannot let a whole hour of the Dean Obeidallah show go back without the mention of Russia. For all of his acting out in insecurity and threats, we never see it directed towards the Russians.
Putin, no one's been tougher on the Russians. They haven't imposed any sanctions. I told you about.
They have a very affectionate relationship going on, and respectful too.
And also in Lawrence Lemur's book, he talks about Trump selling a lot of properties to Russians over the years down in Florida area, and he was developing probably like millions and millions, and at least 2 were later convicted of being involved in the Russian mafia, and that was money laundering. That's why they were paying it. And the argument is, the suggestion is that Trump knew they were laundering money through him, but he didn't care because it was money.
Right.
And that's what Trump cares about. And it was all Russian influence trying to, at that time, cultivate Trump. And it may very well be that's how they cultivate him over time as an asset. So let's take a break, come back with our friend Raul Reyes right here on the Dean Obeidallah Show.
The Dean Obeidallah Show.
I think Trump clips that they play on the media should come with a health warning saying that if you watch this, you'll get dumber. Never has somebody said so much stupid in so little time as Donald Trump does.
SiriusXM Progress.
New perspectives, important voices, influential ideas. This is the Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. We're here with Raul Reyes. In the commercial, we were talking about our yearbooks. Is there anything embarrassing in our yearbooks from high school or college? Now, there was by one in college, and I'm like, by one day I'm going to bring Sharia law to America. I said, no, I didn't say that. Imagine that. They're just like, you see, his whole plan. I'm going to use the media one day to do a stealth conversion of Americans. So, by the way, in real news during the break, Senator Kamala Harris came out and asked for Ralph Northam, the governor of Virginia, to step aside. So now that potentially means, and Raul, to your point, I thought was an excellent point, that the African-American community should lead on this issue.
Right.
And now you have her, she's a presidential candidate, a leading voice saying he should step aside. That I think that probably sets the tone pretty quickly. Because I imagine she may or may not have spoken to other leading Democrats before she came out, but I think that's going to build. I would think from history would say that. What do you think?
No, I agree with you. And also the fact that if there are any Democrats worried, say, about angering the party or upsetting the power structure in that sense, the fact that she is willing, that she's the first, most prominent person to come out, I think she gives many other Democrats cover to say, like, you know what? Yeah, he has to go. And I'm glad that, that she's putting out a statement, because we all know when people are running for president, they're often so cagey and evasive about everything. So I'm glad that she at least she took a flat out, position rather than dancing around it.
I had a feeling it was
testing the waters for a full weekend. She's out with a statement. Good for her.
Right. Some other candidates, we don't have to name them, may have been wishy-washy on this, but she was not. All I know is when the story broke around 4, I kept waiting for a Northam statement. And the longer it went, the worse I knew the statement was going to be. Because if it was as quickly as, if it would have came right out, like, that's not me. And these guys put it as a joke, this stupid picture. I always hated it. And there's nothing I can do. I'm embarrassed to be on the same page.
Right.
That would have been the best case scenario. And some people would have said you should have done more, but you could discuss that all day. When he came out and said, I'm one of the two, you're in the blackface or the Klan guy. And I'm sure people are going to figure it out from looking at the picture closely. Is it Ralph Northam when he was younger?
Maybe.
In the blackface?
And like, the more that people have time to digest it, it doesn't even matter, say, like, the picture. You just have to remember that somewhere in 1984, there was an event, a public event, I guess, where they were running around like that. So
what were the other costumes?
I mean, like, what type of, like, messed up party was this?
Eastern Virginia Medical School, and I don't want to disparage the school, but somebody in the administration, somebody said this was okay. Like, nobody anywhere in the school said, "What? Are you kidding me?" So. All right, so let's talk about something else here. And not the legal part of it, although we're both lawyers, we could, but, Trump is today again is sort of saying that negotiations are a waste of time between Democrats and Republicans on the budget and the border, and leaning towards, I'm going to declare an emergency. And it could all be posturing, but he had wanted to before. If legally, it seems to be tough grounds for it. I mean, I don't know if you want, in a nutshell, just touch on it, but I don't really want to talk about it politically. I think legally it's a tough sell, but you know what? It goes through the courts. Politically, though, how could the people on the right who call President Obama a tyrant and a dictator
and an emperor,
and with DACA and DAPA going insane, and you have Donald Trump circumventing the elected people in Congress to allow himself to spend $6 billion, $20 billion, $30 billion for a policy that's not voted for by our Congress? How can we can't have this.
It's just most bizarre, but it's very disheartening to me, because my sense, to be frank, is that the president will go ahead and declare national emergency. Because sad to say, when we look at the past 2 years, whenever you've thought there was some line he wouldn't cross, or something that many people on the left viewed as a terrible thing that he just wouldn't do, like canceling DACA, this administration has gone ahead and done it. So I think people should be fully prepared for that. But even I tried to think about it in an abstract term, just not Trump, not this thing. Like, would it be okay for a president to declare national emergency? And there are some instances I could think of, maybe, like if you wanted to declare it around something like the opioid epidemic or gun violence, something that really was
30 Americans dying every day.
Where there really was a consensus that it was a crisis.
200 die from opioids every day.
But not this. Not this. Our border is secure. It's a political crisis that he has created, and it just seems like it will be so legally problematic. And the I think it's the the Emergency Act from '76, whatever. It gives him a lot of discretion. It gives the president a lot of discretion to do what they want. But it was never intended to go around Congress, to circumvent Congress. It was intended to be used in the case of, say, like a Pearl Harbor or a 9/11, where the president had to take action immediately because Congress physically just couldn't get together and convene and meet and take action. It wasn't meant to be used for something like this. That this situation has existed at least since 2014. The asylum seekers on the border. So
and it doesn't even fit the definition of emergency. And Harry Truman, in a famous case that people talk about, and Danny Savalas was on it, talked about it, tried to circumvent Congress to get something to help the war effort, and the court said this is not an emergency. It's a famous case, and the court said this is not an emergency.
And that was during wartime.
And so this is not, and that's why he's got to send. I'm sending more troops down there and all this stuff. So we only got a couple more minutes. You wrote an article for NBC about the concerns of the Latino community about William Barr, Donald Trump's nominee for Attorney General. What are the main ones? We have a couple minutes.
Well, the main things are and it's a concern for the Latino community, but that's who I say I directed the article towards, but these are concerns for all Americans. And William Barr is basically the original hardliner. He supported, the wall long before Trump was on the scene.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he supports, he says sanctuary cities. He said this at his hearing, drive illegal immigration. He wrote he wrote an op-ed defending the original Muslim ban, the first one. He defended that. He co-authored an op-ed in the Washington Post talking about how great Jeff Sessions was. And remember, his tenure includes things like family separation. So he does not strike me as someone who's going to uphold the civil and constitutional rights of Latinos or any, or all Americans. And my big point when it comes to William Barr is this nomination will go through. The Republican majority, it's what it is. I just hope people do not become, in a sense, disengaged because of that political reality. We're aware of that, but we still have to know who William Barr is in order to be vigilant and hold him accountable over these next 2 years. And he's, like I said, he's an immigration hardliner. He's someone who wrote a memo when he was Attorney General before. He wrote this long memo saying we need more mass incarceration. I remember. He's sort of like the architect of all of that. He has so many things in his record that are deeply troubling, but Trump has so lowered the bar in terms of the cabinet and qualifications. It's just the fact that he is not a nut. He is not a crazy person. He's not Trump's former wedding planner that people are saying, well, he's qualified. But there are many qualified people. But that shouldn't just be the only test. He should not just be qualified. He should be someone who could be impartial, who really respect judicial independence. And again, look out for all Americans. And it's not just the president's interests or his base.
And it reminds me of the discussion about Brett Kavanaugh when we had the fighting with the Republicans. I'm like, you can pick just somebody else who's qualified. You don't need Brett Kavanaugh. And with all the problems and the flags raised about him. And the same thing here with William Barr. But in William Barr's case, it looks pretty likely. I mean, like Kavanaugh, he will be confirmed. Okay, let's take a quick break. We'll come back with more of our friend Raul Reyes right after this.
Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127. Dean Obadala Show on Sirius XM Progress 127.
And welcome back, Dean Obadala Show. About a minute left here with our friend Raul Reyes. Raul, so what do you think of Cory Booker coming out today?
Great.
Good candidate?
Great.
I think very solid. I like him.
Outstanding. Yeah, outstanding.
I'm really proud of the candidates. So many.
too. I think
We don't
all
like
of these-
Howard Schultz. He's not a Democrat, folks. Howard Schultz is the worst. But look at the people you can be proud of. Look at the field that's emerging from Liz Warren to, if you want somebody, Senator Kamala Harris, to Cory Booker, to if people want a more, say, less left person, I think Joe Biden might be a choice for people if he so chooses to run.
Well, I'm excited about all these candidates, not only because it's a diverse group and it's a progressive group per se, it's because all the candidates that are coming, that we are seeing emerge, these are thoughtful people who can have policy discussions, will make their own case about why, what they believe in terms of, say, healthcare, immigration policy, or the future of the Supreme Court. They are thoughtful people, and that to me is a huge jump forward for this country.
And it's going to be interesting to see if Bernie Sanders runs. I mean, as time goes on, there's a finite amount of money out there. At some point, you would think people have to come out. I don't know how much longer Joe Biden can wait to Bernie Sanders, but we have to go to a break, my friend Raul. Thanks very much for coming in for the hour.
Pleasure,
I really
Dean.
appreciate it. When we come back to our weekly segment, What Just Happened, we'll have some fun. We'll have maybe some yelling. Who knows? Stick around. Be right back with more of the Dean Obadala Show after this.